Good afternoon, Barstow. Welcome to the first ever episode of The Night Shift. I'm Michael Yagan.
And I'm Aiden Lawler. We're super excited to get started with this podcast, and today we brought in a very special guest, Barstow's own man, myth, and legend, Dr. Gallagher. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're doing all right.
Pretty good.
So we're super glad we could have you, and we just have a lot to ask you. So.
We gotta catch up on something.
Can't wait.
So first of all, you've been in the midst of some controversy as of late over your favorite football team, the Raiders.
Yes.
So we were just wondering, like, how your fandom for that team started, and kind of what the struggle has been like living in Kansas City as a Raiders fan.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, I'm originally from Stockton, California, which is not far from Oakland. When you grow up in the Bay Area, generally speaking, you have some choices for your fandom, right? When I was growing up, when I was a very little kid in the early 80s, the San Francisco 49ers were very good, and their fans were obnoxious. Yeah. You guys have met Dan McNichols, so you know about obnoxious 49ers fans. I couldn't stand them. Like, I was like 4, I was like, ugh, this is awful. These people are awful. They won't shut up about Joe Montana. So I decided to go the other direction. I became a Raiders fan, lots of Raiders fans where I grew up. So I've been a lifelong Raiders fan. Now, I of course never expected that I would live in Kansas City, Missouri someday, right? Like, that's an odd choice for somebody who grew up where I grew up. But this is, I went to college here, ended up staying after college. My life partner, Amy, she's from here. She's a lifelong Chiefs fan. So those Sunday Chiefs-Raiders games can be kind of brutal in our household. But yeah, it is. It's kind of stressful being here. But there's pockets of fellow Raiders fans. Yeah. Like I find if I the Gates Barbecue near my house, like, all the chefs are Raiders fans. If I go in there wearing Raiders gear, I don't get any flack from the people who actually work there. I do discover occasionally fellow Raiders fans in weird places, but it is kind of a lonely life. And especially as the Chiefs have gotten to be so much better. Like, when I moved here, both teams were pretty bad, and had next 10 years were just bad. And then the Chiefs drafted Mahomes, and got much, much better. And so it's been sort of brutal since then. But yeah, I've had some really weird experiences at Arrowhead Stadium wearing Raiders gear, as you can imagine. Luckily nothing that's ever been, violent or anything like that. Though I've certainly seen that in Arrowhead, right? But that happens at any football game you go to. But yeah, it's kind of an awkward experience, but I fight the good fight.
Yeah.
Do you like the Raiders' chances rest of the year? I have my opinions on that, obviously, but
yeah. So the Raiders are trash. It's a terrible team. Quarterback is terrible. Coach is terrible. Fired. Yeah. Terrible coach, terrible human.
They've had a
right?
rough year
It's been a rough year.
Team aspect.
So yeah, if the Raiders could be 8-8 and slip into the playoffs, I'd be surprised. At this point, I'm actually all for just benching all the starters and getting a better draft pick. Like, maybe we could draft a real quarterback. We won't. Even if they had the first round pick, they would draft the fastest receiver who couldn't catch, because I've literally watched the Raiders do that, right? Yeah. So yeah, they're terrible. They're terrible. We're continuing. See, now, you guys probably don't realize this because you're too young, but back around the year 2000, man, the Raiders were good. They were so good. Go back, Google Raiders, Patriots, tuck rule game.
Oh yeah, I've heard about it. I've heard about it.
So the Raiders were like the team of destiny. We were going to go to the Super Bowl that year. And then they ran into Tom Brady. And, Tom Brady at that point was like 22, 23. It was his first, it was his rookie season or whatever it was. And the NFL was totally in the bag for him. The refs poorly officiated that game. The Raiders ended up losing. It was the AFC Championship
Yeah,
game.
I didn't realize that was against the Raiders.
It was against the Raiders, yeah.
Well, and like the one thing we have in common is losing in the playoff to Brady.
Yeah, well,
So,
I mean, that's
two of the last 3 years.
That's something everybody has in common,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Except for Eli Manning.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Somehow.
That's true. That's Peyton Manning said the other day that the only person who's ever been able to beat Tom Brady is my mom.
Yeah.
Because she gave birth to the two quarterbacks who actually stopped him.
Yeah.
The year after that, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers end up switching out their coach. And
To Gruden, right?
They hire Gruden away from Oakland, and then the Raiders go to the Super Bowl where they play Tampa Bay and end up losing. So it's sort of ironic that Gruden's one Super Bowl win is against the team he created, but it's been nothing but terrible since then.
Yeah.
Just absolutely awful.
And so growing up in California, were you a big sports guy? I know you played hockey a lot.
Yeah.
What sports did you play?
Mostly hockey,
Yeah.
A little football, right? You play baseball growing up, that sort of stuff. I wish, weirdly, I sort of wish that I had played soccer. Like, I've come to really appreciate soccer as an adult in a way that I didn't when I was a kid. And I'm like, God, that was a really missed opportunity because soccer's a lot of fun. And there was a lot of opportunity to play it growing up in California, and I don't know why I didn't do that, but I didn't. So
yeah, I mean, I've never really thought of California as a big hockey state.
Especially California.
Yeah. So that's a really good point. But it actually is. There is a fair amount of hockey that happens in California. There's a lot of ice rinks in California, and that's sort of the key. With having a professional hockey teams, there's always going to be amateur hockey, kids playing hockey. But the key for me was that my dad is from Montana.
Okay.
And my dad was an incredible hockey player. He actually had a full ride scholarship to the University of Montana to play hockey, which is kind of a big deal. But he, it's one of those time and place and weird sort of decisions. He actually decided to join the Marines and fight in Vietnam instead of going to college, which he could have easily gotten a deferral on going to the Marines if he had gone to college. So interesting life choice, Dad. But so my dad taught us how to play hockey growing up.
And I know it's a violent sport, but do you have any non-violent, like, fun hockey stories?
That's a good question. Well, I'll tell you a little story about my older brother. When he played hockey, he would take the insides of his gloves and he would cut them out. Because in hockey, it is against the rules to hold somebody, but it's not against the rules to have your hand on them. So he could put his glove on you and grab you, and it would look like his hand was open.
Oh.
But the fingers were cut out, so he'd actually grab you and hold on. That's probably one of my favorite non-violent hockey stories.
It's clever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so too. That's like maybe the only smart thing he's ever done in his whole life. Because my older brother is sort of an interesting character. He one time said to me, one time was shocked to learn that Mexico is not next to Spain because they speak Spanish in Mexico. And I think I was like 8 at the time, and I was like, dude, come on, really? Like, where's a map? Let's find a map. I'm going to explain to you how this ended up happening. So that's a fun my brother story.
So how long does your hockey career end up lasting? Like, did you take it to high school and?
Me? Oh yeah. I took it to high school. Played for a little bit after high school. So yeah, I mean, I don't know how. It's difficult to judge how good you are at something, especially when it comes to sports, right?
Yeah.
Because in your mind, as you remember it, you just remember being awesome. I was okay. I was a good hockey player. I had played, I had played at some pretty competitive levels in high school, and I had continued to play. I had a couple of tryouts for semi-professional teams. And then when I was 19, I rolled a car. Actually, the car rolled me, but it's kind of a long story. But I rolled a car, and I've had back problems ever since. And so I kept trying to play at that competitive level, but I really couldn't.
Yeah.
My back just couldn't take it anymore, and my body just sort of fell apart on me. So at that point, I just kind of gave up on that dream, I guess.
Yeah.
But I still play every once in a while. You know, I'll go play. I haven't played in a league in a while, but I'll still go play a pickup game here and there. I haven't much since COVID because hockey players are kind of gross. But yeah, you know, I'll still play. I still enjoy going out and playing. It's sort of fun as I've gotten older. You know, I'm 41 now. Oh my God, I'm old. You know, it's sort of fun because when you've played hockey for that long, you know what's going to happen kind of before it happens. So you can kind of do stuff to mess with the younger guys. You know, they're working very, very hard, and I take like 10 steps because I know where they're going next and poke the puck away, and I'm gone. You know, so it's sort of fun having that mental edge where I don't actually need to work all that hard when I'm playing now. You know, so it's fun. I still play every once in a while.
And after those days, how'd you really end up in Kansas City working at Barstow?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I graduated from high school, my guidance counselor, well, like right before I graduated, my guidance counselor called me down to his office, and you know, when you go to a large public school that's not great, you know, you're the people who, you know, when you guys think of the counseling department and the college counseling, like generally speaking, you had like one person who wasn't really trained to do either of those things.
Yeah.
So my guidance counselor, Mr. Runyon, called me down to his office, and he sat me down and he said, "You're not going to go to college, are you?" And yeah, he was right. I was not going to go to college. I was a terrible student in high school. My family really didn't have the resources to pay for college. This was, you know, a pipe dream sort of thing. And where I grew up, people really didn't go to college. That was not a common thing. And so he said, you know, have you thought much about what you're going to do after high school? And I really hadn't. I was just going to play hockey, you know. And so he gave me a phone number for a friend of his who had a small business, and was like, call my friend up, he'll hook you up with a job. Turned out his friend who had this small business actually had a .com business, which doesn't really mean much to you guys, but in the late 90s, this was kind of a big deal. And so he basically had a internet company that he was running, providing internet service and whatnot. So I called him up, had a job interview, got a job. I was working in the call center at a telecommunications company, you know, answering the phone when people would call when stuff didn't work. I did that for a little while. And but because it was the .com boom, these companies were expanding so fast, and there was so much investment in technology companies. The companies had like stupid amounts of money for what they were actually doing, and so it was really wasteful and expensive. And so, but it worked out to my benefit. I got after about a year, I got transferred to a branch office in Seattle. And I worked in Seattle for about a year, and then I spent another year in San Diego. So I kind of got to move around. Like, you know, before my 21st birthday, I had lived in Seattle and San Diego. And but at some point, the .com bubble burst. And I was sort of in this situation where it was clear to me that I was probably going to get laid off because the company wasn't doing well. And I didn't really want to be in the situation of trying to pay off my expensive lease for my expensive apartment in San Diego. And so at that point, I decided to move back home, not really knowing what to do with myself. I decided at that point, like, oh, maybe I should go to college. And so I started taking classes at the community college in my hometown. And then one night, I was hanging out with some friends and just sort of realized if I don't get away from the people I grew up with, I'm never going to amount to anything. And so I was talking to a really good friend of mine that I grew up with, George, who, when we graduated from high school, George joined the Army, and he was stationed at Fort Leavenworth. And I was saying, you know, I've got to get away from our hometown. I've got to get away from the guys we grew up with. And he said, you know, well, have you ever thought about Kansas City? And I'm like, Kansas City. I mean, I don't know anything about Kansas City except there's the Chiefs and I hate them, right? And he said, Kansas City is actually really cool. You should come check it out. And so I came and visited for a weekend and decided, maybe that does make sense. Maybe I could live there. It's a big city. It's sort of feels culturally the same as where I grew up. It's not like moving to the East Coast, which is a place I would hate living. So I actually applied to UMKC, and they offered me a very tiny scholarship. But that was enough to convince me that that was the right place for me, because I thought, well, there's no way anybody would ever give me money to go to school. So ended up just staying after I was finished.
So then you found your way to Barstow, and you were a history teacher. But now, over these past couple of years, you're transitioned to administrator. So how has that affected your relationship with students? Because I know, we were talking about this with my sister over Thanksgiving, kind of how she sees you differently because you had her as a student.
Yeah,
but I see you differently because you've been an administrator my whole high school.
Absolutely, yeah. It's hard, right? Because it is a different role. It's a different relationship that you build with the students, and so. One of the things that I try to do as an administrator is find a way to connect to each and every student in a way that has nothing to do with my role in providing discipline or structure, right? That if I can figure out a way to get to know each kid and for them to get to know me in a way that is outside of those traditional administrator-student boundaries, then when we need to have one of those conversations, it will be much easier for all of us involved because we all trust each other, right? And we all know that I am there to support them and to help them grow and reach their goals and all that good stuff. But it is hard, when you are a teacher, and this is the thing that I really miss about teaching, is that you get to spend each and every day with the same group of students, and you get to watch them grow and mature and learn, and you get to watch them struggle with the material, and you get to watch the material click, right? Which is amazing when suddenly it's like, oh, I get it. Like, oh, all right, yeah, we're doing something here. But it's hard, and I do miss that. I miss that quite a bit. But in my current role, I get to help even more students than I did previously. So it's a good thing. So I don't want to make it sound like it's bad, but I do definitely miss teaching, and in particular, I miss the opportunity just to nerd out on history, which is awesome. Obviously, history is the best of all the subjects. If you don't know that at home, and it is an awesome thing when you get paid to sit around and talk about something that you are passionate about, which is a great thing about being a history teacher.
And so now for this year, post-COVID, walk us through kind of your day-to-day. What kind of decisions do you make? And also talk a little bit about the Student Success Center.
Sure.
And what you're all about over there.
Sure, yeah. So the Student Success Center really came out of this realization that students were going to come out of the pandemic experience in very different places, right? There are many students who experienced the pandemic and did not miss a beat academically, right? Grew in the way that you would expect them to grow in the last year and were totally ready to engage this year. But there were a lot of students who missed foundational pieces, whose study skills maybe didn't develop the way that we would expect them to over the course of the year, who, because they were maybe online, missed out on some social pieces that have made picking up steam academically a little bit harder. So just sort of realizing that all of these things were at play, and that we didn't, this is the first pandemic I've lived through, right? So we didn't really know what does that mean? What does a return to normal look like? Because, let's be honest, what does normal even mean anymore, right? So and then you talk about, you have students who are coming from other schools, right? We ended up with a lot of students transferring to Barstow because we handled the pandemic so very well, and uncertain about what would happen moving forward. I think a lot of families were looking for a stable educational environment that they knew would take the steps needed to ensure that we were here and making academic progress. But if you're a new student this year who maybe had a funky educational experience last year and certainly the last quarter, it's entirely possible that as a new student you could be a year and a quarter behind Barstow students. Mm-hmm. And what we do at Barstow is already rigorous and intense. So what does that really mean in terms of where a new student would be and where we would need them to be? So as we're doing the planning for this year, we just really thought, we're going to need to put in place some more support services for students to make sure that everybody has the ability to reach their potential. So it's, for lower school students, we offer basically some of the intensive one-on-one teaching to help fill any foundational things that those students might be struggling with.
Yeah.
With students 6 through 12, a lot of our effort is put on helping students to develop executive functioning skills. So those are things like organization, study skills, how do I prepare for a test, how do I manage my time, right? So a lot of effort around helping students with those things, because generally speaking, the foundations will come if students know how to be the best student they can be. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And then you have this sort of supportive role in the Student Success Center, but you also have an administrative role. And so when you're talking about coming back from COVID, how do you kind of balance the academic accommodations of trying to help people out? How do you balance that with pushing people forward towards
normalcy?
I know you gave a talk in our assembly about finals and how we really haven't had a finals experience and how important it is to really lock in and focus. So how do you balance those two sides?
Well, so my role as an administrator is really my time here at Barstow has been focused on really focused on students and the student experience. So in a lot of ways, the Student Success Center, the idea for the Student Success Center was me sort of looking into my magic crystal ball and saying, if we don't have a system in place, I'm going to be overwhelmed with how to help students. So they really tie in really well, right? But it's more than just that academic support piece, right? If it were as simple as opening your brain up and dumping information in, being a teacher would be a whole lot easier, right? So a lot of this really is about, it's not just about reminding students, oh, you need to study for finals, or giving them a tool to figure out how to break that down and chunk that information out. It's also about making students feel supported, feel like they can be successful. And that looks like different things at different times. In our upper school meeting on Monday, right, that was about very clearly, if you do not take appropriate steps to be successful, you won't, right? Which is kind of a negative message. But then since then, one-on-one, as students have come to the Student Success Center saying, I'm not really sure how to do this, I need some help. Okay, you've got this, we can figure this out, let me walk you through how to do this, and sort of putting those building blocks into place so that students can feel successful. So in a lot of ways, what I was doing as an administrator before just fits really nicely with what we're doing with the Student Success Center.
Yeah, I mean, as both of us, we've only had our only final experience is 8th grade, where it's only 5% of your grade. Yeah. So that was kind of a reality check for I think most of our grade in the freshman grade, which I think it'll be good in the end. But
yeah. Do you guys feel prepared?
I made my schedule last night,
cool.
So I think I feel better now, but I still gotta execute.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I have some room for improvement in the in the preparation department, but I mean, it'll definitely be a challenge this year coming back to it. And
now the good news is that studying for a final really isn't rocket science, right? It really is just a matter of managing your time, managing your effort, right? Mrs. Zimmerman spoke about this in the upper school meeting. This is something I hear about all the time. Oh, I spent 3 hours studying for this and I didn't do well. Well, you spent 3 hours Snapchatting with your biology book open, but somewhere you failed to take in the information, right? So a lot of this really is just about putting in the self-discipline that's necessary in order to keep yourself on task to be successful. Yeah. That's tremendously difficult, right? Especially as a freshman or sophomore in high school. Certainly, I was a terrible student in high school. By the time I got to be a senior, I still had not figured out how to manage that. But so it doesn't require, it doesn't require next levels of intelligence. It requires some of those fundamental things that are going to make you successful later in life, like managing your time, organizing yourself, organizing your thoughts, and executing. Right? And what I'm hoping is that we get out of this finals period with a number of freshmen and sophomores coming to the Student Success Center and saying, I figured out how to be successful in my finals. I had to work really hard at it, and part of why I had to work really hard on it was because I was not prepared at the end of the day to prepare for the final. Because like if you have not been taking notes up to this point in class, you're not prepared to prepare for the final. If you haven't been doing the reading, you're not prepared to prepare for the final. So some of those things that we do over the course of the semester that make preparing for the final infinitely easier are some of the things I'm hoping we can have some conversations about next semester to make all of this a little bit easier and more manageable for people moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that about wraps up what we have for you today.
Thank you for coming on.
Anytime.
Yeah, you were our first ever guest. So
Woo! I would say it went well.
Yeah.
Make sure to tune into our next episode of The Night Shift. And thanks for watching. I'm Aiden.
I'm Michael.
And this is Dr. Gallagher. Thank you.